Good afternoon. Can I start by thanking Leah for her thoughtful and prescient introduction, to Justin, Melinda, the whole team at CEDA, to the sponsors, Adelaide Uni, RAA, Minters. We thank you for facilitating this event. I want to take the opportunity to thank Cliffy for his welcome to country. I am always keen, and I think it's important to sustain a degree of recognition of just how lucky we are on this land that has been cared for by generations of Kaurna people for 65,000 years. It's a pretty long time, and I thank Cliffy for his welcome to country. To the Deputy Premier of South Australia, Kai Ma, and all of my Cabinet colleagues. I don't know which two aren't here, let me know. But most importantly, all of you who have taken the time out of your own very busy schedules to be here at CEDA today to contemplate the moment that we've got before us and the task that we have to realise all of the opportunity that clearly abounds. Something I've picked up on in the time I've been in this job for the last couple of years, you can read all the briefs in the world, but you learn a lot more often just by being out and about and talking to people. And in a world that is too often defined by difference, it's actually quite comforting talking to people and realising that the commonality of basic values is pretty consistent. You don't have to take very long talking to people before you get a sense that, while there'll be things we disagree on, there's probably far more that we agree upon. And it's interesting when you reflect on that, because everybody's journey to that set of values, though, is probably a little bit different. For me, the people that probably had the biggest impact outside of mum and dad, my grandparents on my paternal side. My grandfather was the hardest worker I knew. A pretty common story shared probably by a lot of people in this room. Came here with nothing, literally nothing, apart from a determination to make the most of everything this country provided. And when he ran a seafood business, a pretty modest one in the western suburbs of Adelaide. Part of it was a fish and chip shop before it graduated into a fresh food delivery business and fresh fish delivery business. And it was on Trimmer Parade in Seaton, and the fish and chip shop got turned when he retired. Finally, he realised a lifelong dream to have a pool table in the fish and chip shop. So he got rid of the deep fryer and the refrigerators and everything else, and just put in place a quarter-sized pool table. And as a kid, he would teach me how to play pool, and eight ball and snooker. And it sounds silly, but I can remember clear as a bell him taking that as an opportunity, not just to muck around with me, but to teach me what had motivated him and what he hoped would motivate me. And that was a profound sense of opportunity. I can picture it in my mind now, lining up for shots as a kid and him telling me, just slow down, don't rush, be deliberate, but then take your shot. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And him always using the word, take your opportunities. Take your opportunities. And that's always sort of stuck with me more than I probably gave myself credit for at the time. And I feel like right now, in this incredibly privileged position I have a profound responsibility for as long as I'm in this job to make sure that the state takes this opportunity. Because what I seek to put to you today is a sense of just how big that is and how serious a task we have before us if we want to realise it. Let's start with where we're at now. And I'm trying, this is going to be, heads up, this is going to be death by PowerPoint, right? So you're forewarned. So the current state of play. So we currently have the strongest growing economy in the nation. The strongest. This is ABS, state final demand. We're not used to this. This is not what South Australians became accustomed to through most of my lifetime. But right now, this is the state of play. This is giving us a record low unemployment rate. Not just a little bit low, but unprecedented, consistently low. This is the South Australian unemployment rate going right back to when monthly records started in the late 70s, every month. And what you see here is that we're not just a little bit lower than where we've been in the past, we are a lot lower than we've ever been. We have only had an unemployment rate with a 3 in front of it 14 times in the history of South Australia. All of those 14 times have been in the last few years. What is even more remarkable than this, and frankly more important to me than the unemployment rate, is the fact of the participation rate. Now, you're engaged citizens in this room. The participation rate, of course, is the percentage of South Australians of working age who choose to participate in the labour market. We have traditionally always been below the rest of the country. Now, you can get a low unemployment rate if most people decide to sit home and not try. But to get a low employment rate with a high participation rate, that's the sweet spot. That's hard to do. And right now in South Australia, we have got the highest participation rate we've ever had. Highest participation rate we've ever had, at the same time we've got the lowest unemployment rate we've ever had. Each of you in this room that is responsible for employing people should be exceptionally proud of your contribution to this effort. People will look down upon, I think often unfairly upon, people who don't participate in the labour market and call them welfare bludgers. Well, that ain't the truth anymore in South Australia. People are getting to work at rates of never before. And together, notwithstanding more people participating in the labour market, the thing I like the most, that many of you won't, is we now have the fastest growing wages in the country. Now, for me, this is a cause of celebration. Some of you probably don't like it so much, but this is a good thing. This is a good thing. Our average weekly earnings are on the up and outpacing everybody else in terms of growth. And what that has resulted in is a situation we're now catching up. We, only 4 years ago, had a 9% differential between the South Australian average weekly earnings and the national average. A 9% differential. We've got that gap down as a result of our growth to 5.8%. In 4 years, we've almost halved it. And we've achieved it while having being the lowest taxing state on the mainland on a per capita basis. Not bad. Hopefully you like that. Now, what does that mean? Well, look, don't take my word for it, and let's say you don't want to believe the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Let's look at what some other people are saying. And many of you would have seen this before, but we're top. ANZ had their SEDA meter out the other week. We're number 1. Westpac's got us as a, quote, poster child in terms of our economic performance. ComSec, with their State of the States, they've given us number 1. At the moment, we're top for economic growth and construction work. BCA, Business Council of Australia, rated best place to do business in the country. HIA, Property Council, but my favourite is the IPA, the Institute of Public Affairs. Now, the IPA, I've got some names of people that call the IPA their political home. Howard, Morrison, Abbott, Dutton, Marshall. The just appointed yesterday new Shadow Treasurer in the Angus Taylor Shadow Cabinet, Tim Wilson, former director of the IPA. And what's the IPA? This bastion, this home breeding ground of the conservative side of politics. What are they saying about South Australia? where we're first on taxes and overall on red tape. This is what my political adversaries are saying about South Australia. So imagine how I feel when I wake up in the mornings and read what our adversaries are saying about us. Imagine how excited I am about what our friends are saying about us. Yes. Truth be told, that of these headlines, only one is actually true. One's a real one, one's a fake one. I'll let you try and work out which one's which. So, but the truth is, the state of play that we're currently enjoying is unbelievable. It's a pretty good starting position. But I'd submit to you that we haven't even really begun. On what I want to talk to you about are the big opportunities before us, and I'm only going to talk to the ones that have been relevant this week. There are any number that could be represented in this room from a range of areas of the economy that are growing and doing well. I'm going to talk about two, and I'm going to talk about, and just to try and, for the sake of time, I'm going to focus on the two that are topical just in the last 72 hours. On Sunday, it was a really big day, and I'm not talking about the golf. I'm talking about the announcement I was able to be party to with the Prime Minister and a number of people represented here today, and I acknowledge Adrian Seaton from ANI and Vice Admiral Mead from the Australian Submarine Agency. We announced a $30 billion investment on the Commonwealth in the submarine construction yard. This is just the yard. This is just the buildings they're going to build the submarines, let alone the submarines themselves. $30 billion. Now, I really am struggling, and I've tried to find different ways, but struggling to depict or to illustrate and submit to the people of this state just how big this is. So just bear with me. $30 billion, that's 2 T&D projects, the non-stop South Road, the tunnels. It's 15 Royal Adelaide hospitals, 15 of them, right? This yard, let me give you some context. The orange here is the Osborne South Shipyard. This is where they're building the Hunter-class frigates. Some of these buildings are the biggest buildings in the country at the moment. The one I was standing in on the weekend, which is the main consolidation hall, the BAE facility there. You know, this thing is so big, it's got its own weather system almost. It's huge, right? It's genuinely big. The Osborne South Shipyard required 9,400 tonnes of structural steel to construct. The submarine yard is going to take, I can't read that, 126,000 tonnes. 55,000 cubic metres of concrete were required for the Osborne South Shipyard. This is going to take 710,000 cubic metres. More than just the volume, you've got to get your head around the complexity of this. The Osborne South Shipyard has to be built to a 1 in 500 year earthquake standard. The submarine yard, 1 in 10,000 year earthquake standard. The steel has to be put in differently. The concrete has to be nuclear grade concrete. More complexity, greater requirements. The engineering is formidable, which means the Osborne South Shipyard took 1.5 million work hours to build. This is going to take 66 million hours. The building here is 180 metres long. Right? It's huge. The fabrication hall is 420 metres long. One building. I cannot overstate how big a task this is to be constructed over the course of the next 15 odd years. It's going to take 4,000 to 5,000 people just to build the yard that's going to build the submarines. So let's think about what is required in terms of defence workforce. Currently in the state, approximately 9,900 people work in defence. That's represented across a range of programs. let's take everybody that works in defence at the moment. That is set to grow substantially between now and 2040 to the tune of 4,500 people. But when you look at specific projects, the Collins-class submarine program, that employs over 1,000 people, life of type extension, full cycle docking. Hunter-class hasn't yet reached peak construction. That employs thousands within its own right. And then, of course, we get to the big one. This is all baked in. This is already happening and growing as we speak. But AUKUS hasn't begun, and it's going to employ 6,000 people. We're going to have an additional minimum direct employees over 10, this is just the direct employees, 10,000 additional on where we are now over the course of the immediate decade ahead. This is a huge task. Mining. Leah touched on it. Copper. The world is short of copper. The copper price is escalating. We need a lot more of it globally, and we need it quickly, all associated towards electrification. Alleluia. South Australia has the resource that everyone else wants. We've finally got our turn. The rest of the nation has had theirs, the VIX and the gold, New South Wales and Queensland with the coal, Western Australia with iron ore and natural gas. We've got the copper. We've got the copper. You beauty. Let's look at the front page of the Fin Review today. This tells you everything that you need to know. I downloaded the Fin Review and I was like, I love this headline. I love this headline. Actually, sorry, this headline. BHP have now made the transition. BHP is not an iron ore miner anymore. They're a copper miner that also does iron ore. And the big picture opportunity for BHP is here in South Australia. It's why they spent $10 billion acquiring Oz Minerals in the biggest corporate acquisition that we've had in recent memory. And the numbers are all in front of us. The government is working closely, and we'll have more to say about this in due course with BHP, and things are going well in respect to the progress of the Northern Water project. I could give a whole presentation on that alone, but time doesn't permit. So where are we at? This is mining now in the state. All of mining represented here. That's going to continue to grow across a range of different commodities that we already get access to. The big one, however, is the growth that we'll see in copper, and this is just over the course of the next 15 years, much of which is with BHP, as we contemplate Northern Water, two-stage smelter, and then a doubling of copper production, even potentially tripling into the future. And then where I was only yesterday, in Whyalla, which doesn't get talked as much about as a copper opportunity because it's not quite as big, but globally as significant, and that's magnetite. Magnetite expansion is now in train at Whyalla, bearing in mind that at Whyalla, adjacent to it is the Middleback Ranges, one of the world's best resources of magnetite. Magnetite being iron ore in a different form to what we see in Western Australia, which is hematite. That matters because magnetite lends itself to the production of a decarbonised form of iron, then steel. And the prices of magnetite are escalating. Iron ore, South Australia, the first ever iron ore mine in Australia was in South Australia at Iron Knob, which is why Whyalla is where it is today. An amazing history in its own right. But it just so turns out they've got through all the hematite, and you could see the layers there yesterday, if you might have seen it on the news, and they're now down to the magnetite. And we announced yesterday the investment that we're making with the support of all the bidders of the steelworks and the mines to now start getting out the magnetite, which is economic and commercial in its own right, hence the down payment yesterday. So mining, again, huge source of growth in the next 15 years. And the thing that I like about these two industries the most is what it's all about, and that is higher paying. You look there at the South Australian average weekly earnings, look at the comparison towards people in defence and mining immediately adjacent to it, people in construction and professional services servicing those industries. These are higher paid jobs than where the state is at the moment. Higher paid jobs means better incomes, better living standards. That's the main game. That's the opportunity to improve living standards, to actually allow everybody else to feel as though they're getting a piece of the action, even if they're not in this room today. Now, what is it going to take to realise this opportunity? What policy endeavour is required to make it manifest in people's lives? Well, first and foremost, it has to be skills. Now, we have already started announcing skills policy, and you would be forgiven for not being across all of the intricate detail of skills policy, because it's just not politically sexy. When we're out there at the shopping centres and our candidates do the door knocking, the truth is South Australians don't open the front door and say, oh, fantastic politician. But if they do, rarely do they say, forget everything, I just want to know where you're at on skills. It just tends not to have that political cut through, which is why you might not be familiar with what we've already announced. But even this week, we announced an AUKUS skills-specific package. University scholarships, investment in TAFE, more apprenticeships being funded to actually get this happening. We've announced more technical colleges. That's a program that's working. 3-year-old preschool rollout, massive investment in TAFE that Blair is working with. We've had the university come together. Flinders and Adelaide Uni are both gearing up for these opportunities. Over 1,000 additional Commonwealth supported places just in these programs alone that I was able to secure with the feds. But I want to read you why and how this actually matters, right? And you know, this is the best letter that I've got since I've been in the job. And like, we get written to a fair bit, and there's good and there's bad, obviously. Oh, I'm going to read you a good one. Because hopefully this provides a human face to what this is all about, right? Dear Mr. Premier, last year my 15-year-old son was year 10 in a public school, wagging, disillusioned, unsupported and lost. This year, this is back in 8th of November 2024, this year with the move to Findon Technical College, he has had work experience at BAE, Liebherr, Axum. He has had 3 terms of work experience at Osborne. They are doing vet stuff, SACE stuff, virtual reality stuff, hands-on stuff at industry-based learning. Can I tell you, he recently won a machining apprenticeship at BAE for 2025. He will do a school-based apprenticeship and now has worldwide opportunities with a worldwide leader. I am so proud of my son Cooper, beyond words proud. With countless thanks, Sheridan. This kid, I mean, this is everything that any person in public policy or politics would kill for. I mean, that's, and Blair and I have spoken about this, it's genuinely life-changing. And we can take that and put it on steroids with a skills policy to actually make that opportunity real. But you can do the skills, but then you actually have to do the workforce planning as well, which speaks to population. And this is where we start to get a little bit edgy in the context of the current political environment nationally. Our state's population is 1.9 million people. You and I both know there's no votes at the moment in saying that number needs to go up. There'll be a lot of people. There'll be votes for me to have one to say, we're going to cap it. We are currently growing at 20,000 people per annum. Last year, 21,167 people precisely is how much our state's population grew by. Now, going back some time now, I convened in the government a working group, this is without being in public view, in working group within government, convened by the CEO of DPC, Rick Purse, the Department of Premier and Cabinet, the Department of Treasury and Finance, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Department of State Development with also an interest in education, and said, right, we actually genuinely have to do the work to make sure that one arm of government is talking to the other. We have to do the work that if we're going to grow and get this work done, that we're actually thinking through what is also required in other areas of policy to land it. Infrastructure policy, education skills policy I've touched on, but also policy when we think about the big picture challenge on population and housing. How many workers do we actually need? What does the population need to grow by to realise this opportunity, not in a way that compromises living standards, but to actually enhance them? And the answer, once all the tables and spreadsheets and work is done by the pointy heads, we need, I say with affection, we need 2,011 additional skilled workers in South Australia each and every year. 2,511 extra on what our population is already growing by, skilled workers. Now, skilled workers don't come alone, they have children, or maybe even arrive with children, and that means they have, on average, dependents, normally at a multiplier of 0.6, which means the population needs to grow by an additional 3,218 people each and every year. Now that starts to add up pretty quick, and you can experience that at the moment, which speaks to the greatest source of frustration and discontent in the community, in my view, and that is associated with housing. A sense that at the moment, the intergenerational compact that every kid should be able to afford a home and provide for their families is somehow getting further away from us rather than closer. And in the past, they would be right and be frustrated about it, and in turn attracted to the types of simplistic policies that you might be familiar with recently in the media. So where are we actually at? So in South Australia, we're building 11,500 homes a year. It's not enough. That's the 5-year average. It hasn't been enough. That is the truth. I can give you a long dissertation as to what has contributed to this problem, but it's just not enough. And how do we know that? Well, there's any number of metrics. There's lived experience, but one good one is the rental vacancy rate. It's been down to 0.4% in South Australia, the lowest in the nation. That looks like market failure when someone puts up a rental property and there are literal queues around the block of people trying to get in. Now, understand what that means. 27% of our population are renters. 27%. To be more specific, in terms of numbers of people, we are talking about 190,000 people in our state who can barely get in, get a roof over their head. Hence escalation in rates and the inflationary consequences on their standard of living. 0.4% is not enough. Now, you ask, the question I ask, well, what's the sweet spot in the vacancy rate that represents some form of equilibrium in the market? You want to be shooting between 1 and 1.5%. 1.5%, you've still got an investment signal for investors. You've still got rents going up and house prices going up, but what you don't have is market failure. So where are we at? So what have we done? Well, we've made some major policy interventions through the roadmap. I won't give you all of them, I've top 5. Record land releases done by this government. We've expanded the urban growth boundary, which was considered a sacred cow. We've abolished stamp duty for first home buyers on new builds. Point of policy difference between the major political parties. New builds. No point in driving up the price and having more people fighting for homes that are already built. You don't have to be an economics student to understand supply and demand. New builds is what we need. We don't need more demand for the stuff that's already there. That's how we got to this problem. It's policy madness. Accelerating code amendments at warp speed. Nick Champion, he has had to suffer my intolerable impatience on actually getting code amendments done, and they are actually going through the system. But also critically, a record investment in water infrastructure, also topical. Also a point of policy difference. We had state Liberal Party candidates days ago days ago promising reductions in water bills. Turned out that they actually had made a decision to abandon that policy, but anyway, that's another matter. Or exercise restraint. So what has all that got us? We're now up to 12,870, more homes built last year than any other year in the history of the state. And that drumbeat, if sustained every year and every single year, starts to see the vacancy rate improve. We've already got it to 0.8%. We've already got it back up to 0.8%. We have to keep that going into the future, each and every year into the future. But it's still not enough. In fact, to account for the population increases that I mentioned, the 3,000 additional people on top of the 20,000 already coming every year, we need to get that up to 1,350. And if we want to get the vacancy rate to that point of equilibrium, we've got to go further again to 13,500 homes a year. If we build 13,500 homes every single year for the next decade and beyond, year in, year out, we get our housing market functional again, and a vacancy rate at something that represents like improved living standards. We need to build 13,500 homes a year. If we don't build 13,500 homes a year, we don't get the capital because we don't get the people, and if we don't get the people, we don't get the labour, and if we don't get the labour, all that economic opportunity doesn't happen. What you are going to see from me and my team over the 4.5 weeks ahead is a consolidated policy effort that isn't vote chasing. You'll see a bit of that, but you are going to see a consolidated policy effort that seeks to treat seriously the seriousness of the opportunity and the moment that we are in. Focusing on one policy, talking to the next to unlock the growth, to unlock the living standards. This type of policy work isn't the one that immediately resonates in a political campaign, but for people who are at a CEDA event, I submit to you, I impress upon you that this is the main game. Now more than ever before, because it speaks to living standards. And contemplate the alternative. Contemplate not just the opportunity of taking action, but also contemplate the consequence of inaction. Seeing that opportunity passes by. You don't have to look very far to understand what that looks like. Look around the world where we see political paralysis deliver policy paralysis and then societies on the decline. Look what's happening in the UK. Look what's happening in much of Western and Eastern Europe. Look what's happening in some parts of North America. We see a fracturing of the political discourse, policy dysfunction, and then an exacerbation of the problem because people submit simplistic solutions that only turn out to undermine social cohesion, which in turn diminishes the prospect of economic hope and prosperity. It's the serious work that delivers the living standards, and it's the living standards that keeps the polarisation and the anger at bay. We can do that here. We start from a strong position, an inclusive, proudly multicultural, currently quite prosperous South Australia. Imagine what we can do if we are the part of the world that is having the confidence and the courage to look out to opportunity rather than look in on ourselves. If we do this and do it well, we can genuinely be a source of hope and aspiration for everybody in this state, let alone other parts of the country and the world. I'm excited about that. We can line up our own shot, our own opportunity and take it. I look forward to having these policies and these announcements continue over the weeks ahead. Elections are important. They turn out to matter. And it's a privilege to be here with you today and to contemplate the future ahead of us here in South Australia. Thank you very much.